We now welcome on Eddie Radosevich from Soonerscoop.com. Eddie, I think I've known you for almost a decade at this point. I know you were working
Crazy.
for Rivals then. Who knows if we're going to be working for Rivals again? Don't think that's going to be the case. But I've known you since meeting you, I think, back at like 2016 Big 12 Media Days. And here we are covering SEC programs. You're not covering Bob Stoops anymore. I'm on Steve Sarkisian. That's head coach number 3. So we've seen a lot of changes over the course of our time covering these programs.
Yeah, it's crazy. I thought last year was so weird because I think there was such buildup for those 2 years going into, going out of the Big 12, the weirdness that it was, and then finally getting to the SEC. And obviously it went really well for Texas over the last couple of years. Sark has that thing headed in a great direction. I think it's a sustainable direction. But yeah, things have been kind of interesting here in Norman. And 2025 is a massive, massive year for Brent Venables, just the tenure moving forward. And, I think that, like, I was telling some guys a couple of weeks ago, just in talking about Oklahoma football coming out of the spring, it's kind of weird because I think that, there's a lot of people obviously that aren't happy with the, not necessarily the direction, but what they've done over the first 3 years with Brent going 6-7, 2 of the last 3 years. It hasn't been great, but there is like this strange positivity right now around the program. And I think a lot of it has to do with the moves that they made during the December period and getting John Mateer in, as well as Ben Arbuckle, obviously, to run the offense. And it makes for a rather interesting 2025. And when you look at Oklahoma's schedule going into next year, it's a lot like what they had a year ago. It's going to be really, really good. And oh, by the way, you add in Michigan in week 2.
I talked with Zach Abaverdi from the Gators website, Gators Online, and it just feels like there's so many similarities between what's happening with Florida and what's happening with Oklahoma. You got a head coach kind of had a very, very difficult start to their tenures in their respective jobs, and they're banking big seasons on star quarterback play, star offense. And it also seems like everybody involved in those programs, whether it be athletic department, university, I know fan base can have their qualms, but everybody still seems to be in support of what Brent Venables is trying to do, even in year 4 with a couple under 500 seasons.
That's the crazy thing, is because I think that, like, if you don't separate them, but if you could separate what's happening on Saturdays during the fall and the lackluster records that Oklahoma's put out, I think, like, the culture wise, and when you look at like the big picture of what the program is right now, there's not a person that complains about where this thing is at. And I think that, ultimately he's going to be judged off wins and losses, for his tenure or for what this thing is going to be in 2025. But the moves that they made and being able to go out and get Jim Nagy, he's running the front office for Oklahoma now. They're trying to go to a more of a pro structure, if you will, with what they're doing in recruiting and as well as the NIL world. There's a lot of people that love what they've been able to do. And I think going out and getting John Mateer, getting Jaden Ott in the spring portal was kind of a big win. I think a lot of people looked at around and, he hadn't even really entered the portal, and there were rumors about him possibly heading to Norman. I know Texas was obviously somebody that Oklahoma fans, or, I think the program saw as a little bit of a threat for Ott, but to get him into the program and to get some of these guys in, it just feels like there's been a rejuvenation. And, certainly they're going to have to be better offensively than they were a year ago. And I think that you come out of the spring and you feel like it could be good. Now, with that said, though, the bar is just so low for what they were offensively a year ago. I'm sure that you're familiar with. They don't have to be much better, but they should be a little bit better than what they were a year ago. And it's going to be a lot of pressure on Mateer and Arbuckle to kind of get this thing right, because I think a lot of what Oklahoma's win-loss record is going to be in 2025 is going to be determined on what they are offensively, because they feel like they should be pretty good defensively entering year number 4, despite losing Danny Stutzman and Billy Bowman to the NFL draft.
So let's go in on that offense. As long as I've been alive, basically this entire century, Oklahoma's been on the cutting edge of offense. You go from Mike Leach to, the Sam Bradford days, whether that's Kevin Wilson, any of a number of guys, Lincoln Riley, and then even Jeff Lebby, bringing in their various strengths. To see them just stumble under Seth Luttrell and Joe John Finley in the interim was jarring, not just for all of college football, but I'm sure for Oklahoma fans as well. What does Ben Arbuckle bring? And then as a result, what might John Mateer bring that may look a little bit like what we're used to seeing from Oklahoma?
Yeah, I mean, we'll start with Arbuckle, and I think like this might just be an example of how bad things were a year ago offensively. He has a vision. He knows what he wants to be able to do offensively, and I think that like the big thing with Seth Luttrell is they were trying to blend what Jeff Lebby was doing. If you go back to when they, I guess, elevated him to be the offensive coordinator, continuity was the word that they wanted to keep some continuity with what Jackson Arnold was doing leading into 2024, and it just never came together. And I think that you saw even in games against Temple last year, Houston, Oklahoma struggled at times offensively, and I think that they never just got off on the right foot. You had a young quarterback in Jackson Arnold that basically had no guidance. I mean, I think that we're all idiots for looking back and thinking, yeah, it's going to be fine. He had a really good offense at North Texas. They didn't have a quarterbacks coach a year ago. And for a young quarterback that I'm sure his head was spinning coming out of the spring, it was awful. I mean, it was literally statistically the worst offense Oklahoma's put on the football field in the modern era of Oklahoma football. So I think a vision, just knowing what they want to be able to do, being confident in what they wanting to do from an offensive play caller standpoint has been night and day. I know that we talked to Ben Arbuckle a couple times. Very impressive guy. I can see why he was highly recommended, why Brent Venables ended up getting him the opportunity at 29 years old. But at the same time, there is going to be, for I think the Oklahoma fan base, there's going to be a lot of, we've heard this before. We were told they were going to be good a year ago, and they just simply weren't. So they're going to have to go out and prove it. I think that you'll be able to see in week 2 against Michigan kind of where that thing's at. And then you get to John Mateer, and he kind of comes in with Ben Arbuckle kind of hand in hand from Pullman. And I think that what you see is what you get. He's a super confident guy. I know that, kind of the cliche line around Norman is he has a lot of Baker Mayfield kind of moxie just when he's talking to the media. It reminds you a little bit of just the comfort. And I think mentally it's because he's from Middle Texas, DFW area, from Little Elm. But at the same time, when you talk to the players and going through the spring ball and everything that came with that over the last couple of months, I do think that he is a guy that has come in and he's been able to really kind of instill a little bit more confidence in guys that maybe had lost it a year ago and what the staff was asking them to do. Super accurate from what we had heard coming out of spring football. And, that's why it feels like they have a quarterback in place, a guy that's done it obviously at an extremely high level. How can he do it in the SEC is going to be the biggest question mark. And that's why it kind of becomes more interesting. And kind of when you look at the skill positions and then you look at an offensive line that was terrible a year ago, they should be much better in 2025. And I think that's kind of the basis or the foundation for a lot of positivity right now going into the summer and then obviously into the beginning of camp in August.
You talked about Ott, big addition when healthy for the Golden Bears, who is one of the best running backs in the ACC, going to help that running game. Last year, Oklahoma, if you think about that offense, aside from the poor coordination, the poor infrastructure, it was just the injuries, whether it was just name your wide receiver, something happened to him. Deion Burks comes back, gain a couple other guys from the portal. Assuming that and I'm not one of those blame the training staff people. I'm sure the people on the Crimson Corner are like, oh, what are we doing in there? But at the same time, assuming you have some better injury luck, what's this wide receiver core going to look like?
I think it's a talented group, but I do think there's a lot of question marks. And, they brought in Giovanni Gibson. He was the guy that through all spring, him and Mateer had really developed a connection, a chemistry on the field. Even going back through spring break, they kind of divide their spring up into like 2 portions. So they have a spring break right in the middle, and they went down into Dallas and they were throwing together. And then he gets hurt. He broke his ankle on like the 3rd to last day of spring ball. So he's going to be probably sidelined through the month of September. I think that they do feel like he's going to be able to come back at some point in October. I think a lot of Oklahoma fans hope it's the second weekend of October for OU Texas. But he had really kind of made a name for himself, and he's coming out of Arkansas Pine Bluff. And that's kind of where the Oklahoma NIL, wide receiver, spring portal, December portal, kind of all ties in together. They're taking a lot of chances. I think that they kind of made a decision that we're going to pay the guys that we really want, and then we're going to really try to lean on our evaluation. And Giovanni Gibson kind of fits that bill. Jermichael Carter, a guy that they brought in from McNeese State, is kind of in that ilk of there's a lot of talent. You like the measurables. Can he play at this level, though? Isaiah Satania, another guy coming in from Arkansas. You feel a little bit more confident that he can do it. He can be a day one guy coming in from Arkansas, has a little bit of D1 SEC pedigree. So they did really well. Keontez Lewis is another guy, Southern Illinois. They feel like he's a veteran player. He's played a lot of college football, but same question for all the other guys. Can he play at this level? And then despite the injuries a year ago, which was insane, I think at the back end of the season, they were basically without their top 7 wide receivers that they would have started the month of August to begin fall camp. You hope that those guys grow from the experience. Zion Kearney, Zion Raggins, guys that were in the program a year ago, had to play. Probably wasn't the most glowing thing, but I think you look up and now that they're sophomores, they went through the doldrums of having to be forced onto the field. You hope that comes to fruition. And then they brought in 2 freshmen, and Manny Choice and Elijah Thomas. Elijah Thomas is a guy that I think that a lot of people around the program feel like is going to play from day one as a freshman, coming in from Chakota, Oklahoma. It's right on the border of Oklahoma and Arkansas, way eastern Oklahoma. But we do a recruiting show every week, kind of highlighting guys that balled out over the weekend. And it was like, okay, it's time for the Elijah Thomas corner of this is what he did against a 3A team in the state of Oklahoma. So they're really excited about him. There's a lot of talent. Emmett Jones has done a pretty good job stockpiling talent. You got to have that thing come to fruition. And going back to Ben Arbuckle, I think one of the things that I think everybody was excited about when he came in from Washington State was the fact that he's going to get the ball to your best players' hands. And if you can do that with an accurate quarterback in John Mateer, I think people feel like this could be a pretty good offense going into next year.
I don't think anybody, whether they're Texas fans, whether they're college football fans, will ever think that Bill Bedenbaugh forgot how to do it. But they've looked over recruiting the past few years before that 2025 class and thought it doesn't look the same as it used to. Then they go and get Michael Fasusi. They bring a good amount of guys back from that line last year that had just, they'd be very, very up and down, which I'm sure is not something Oklahoma fans are used to either. So with the idea that maybe Fasusi's there gunning for a starting spot or starting, with the fact that you brought in at Oklahoma a lot of different transfers, what is the offensive line? Is it going to look maybe like something we used to see from Oklahoma, or there's still some growing pains to go?
This video is brought to you by Andre the Lawyer. If you're injured, trust the team that secured millions for their clients and helped thousands of Texans with their injury case. Car wrecks, slip and falls, 18-wheeler accidents, on-the-job injuries, and wrongful deaths. Don't let insurance tell you what your claim is worth. Hire Andre the Lawyer to fight for you. Principal office is in Dallas, but they serve Texans throughout the state. So don't wait and call Andre the Lawyer today at 214-444-8808. That's 214-444-8808. The contact information is in the description.
Much better. I think that, last year, kind of the same situation as wide receiver because of the injuries. They had to put guys like a Logan Howland, like a Heath Ozida out onto the field, and they grew. I mean, they got better from where they started to the end of the season. Getting Troy Everett back at center was a big win for Oklahoma because I think that, without him at the beginning of the season, it just never kind of coalesced together. So they have some guys that have played a lot of football. Jacob Sexton's back, Jake Taylor's back. And then obviously, like you said, Joe, you bring in Michael Fasusi, you bring in Ryan Foje in the recruiting class a year ago. It's a better group. I think they're still going to have to go out and prove that they've taken the steps from where they were a year ago. But I think that at the same time, they feel like they're pretty good. And, they went out and they got guys in the portal. Derek Simmons was a guy that came in from Western Carolina that they feel like could be maybe in line to be a starter at the beginning of the season. We'll see if that sticks. We'll see how Michael Fasusi is able to get his feet underneath him. He had a really good spring. Ryan Foje, the same thing. Wouldn't be surprised if both those guys end up starting at the end of the year, but I think that speaks to more how talented they are than it does what the other guys aren't doing. So, they were terrible a year ago. I think that it kind of went hand in hand with everything else. And, there was a lot of times that, Yeah, Jackson Arnold wasn't good. Seth Luttrell wasn't good. But at the same time, when they did have a play called and it's basically over once the ball is snapped because there's guys in the backfield, it was hard to judge everything. Everything kind of is a volcano. It just erupted at one time and ended up being a little bit of a shit show. So they do feel like it's better. It's better from where it was a year ago. Coming out of the spring, I think that they feel pretty confident about that group as a whole. And it's going to be kind of interesting, just like everything on the offensive side of the ball, of where this thing ends up, start of the season.
On the defense, Lou's defensive coordinator, Zach Alley, goes back to work with Rich Rod at West Virginia. A lot of different things, castle intrigue, I guess to say, with why Alley decided to leave Oklahoma for West Virginia. Kind of at this point here in May, doesn't really matter. What does matter is that Brent Venables is a guy going to be calling the offense or calling the defense. And he's doing that in a very, very important year for his tenure at Oklahoma. This is still a very, very talented defense, but have you noticed anything new about Brent now that he's grabbing the reins again? Or maybe, I can't remember if this is the first time he's done it at Oklahoma, or maybe if he had to do it in his previous couple of years. But with him calling the defense and being the head coach, what should we expect from that side of the ball from the Sooners?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I think like when Allie left, it was a little bit of a surprise to a lot of people. Those rumors were out there, even going all the way back to when we were in Fort Worth for the bowl game. But, at the same time, when the dust settled and everything cleared and you start talking to the players once spring ball started, it was almost kind of like, yeah, duh, he was going to be the defense coordinator. And I think that he's had a large hand or, a large helping hand with Zach Alley. I think that's maybe one of the reasons that he wanted to go out and do something on his own. But at the same time, I think that when you look at the players Oklahoma has returning, are Mason Thomas, guys that they feel pretty confident about, whether it be a Ginger Williams, Jacoby Johnson, Dominic Williams coming back, Jaden Jackson coming off of a freshman All-American season, David Stone, the scare that Oklahoma fans had when he entered the portal for 48 hours. There's a good making of a really, really good defense. And I think that, there's a lot of these guys that are being asked to step up and play bigger roles this season that have been in the system for a while. And I think you're going to be able to see some of the fruits of those labors that they put in, kind of working behind guys like a Billy Bowman or a Danny Stutzman. It feels like this is going to be a pretty good defense, and they were able to go out and get a Kendall Daniels coming in from Oklahoma State, who, just through spring kind of fits the cheetah role that Brent Venables wants to be able to run. Maybe a little bit better than some of the guys that they had on campus. You return a number of guys in the secondary that you feel pretty confident in. And, I straight up, this is probably one of the better defensive line groups, defensive ends and interior guys that Oklahoma's had. And I think like when you look up and they brought in Todd Bates and, he was heralded coming in from Clemson, it feels like they've kind of started to make that turn. And Jaden Jackson, David Stone, Dominic Williams, Grayson Halton, it's a good group of guys. It's more than they've had in a long, long time on the defensive line. And I think that when you put all those parts together, it feels like this is a defense that could take another step from obviously where they've been over the last 3 years. And it's been incremental steps each year.
Who's the new Danny Stutzman? And I don't mean the new middle linebacker, but the new guy that Texas fans on a certain side of the Cotton Bowl are going to look at and be like, I hate that guy. I want that guy to fail at everything he does. Who may be that guy who, if you're looking at it from the Crimson and Cream perspective, you're like, this is the heart and soul. This is the defensive leader. Because Stutzman, for as much as Texas fans don't like him, guy could play ball, playing in the NFL as a result. Billy Bowman's the same way. I don't know if he was the same vocal type of guy Stutzman was, but who's that new leader on the defense that, Oklahoma fans are going to love and Texas fans are going to end up hating?
It's a great question because I think that's one of the questions that we kind of left spring kind of wondering about. And I think that there's a couple candidates. Kobe McKenzie's more of a quieter guy. I think, he obviously flirted with Texas coming out of high school. He's going to be a guy, Samuel Masigo, kind of both linebackers that I think Oklahoma fans are really excited about. I know that the program's really excited about Samuel Masigo, but maybe from a production standpoint, I don't know if there's going to be anybody that can just match the character that Danny kind of played and developed over the last couple of years in the OU Texas game. It's almost like one of those things, and to a certain extent, that you have to go out and you have to do it on the Cotton Bowl field before you really get that moniker, if you will, or like the confidence to be able to go out and kind of speak his mind like Danny did. But everybody's excited about R. Mason Thomas. And I think that, when you look at him, he was one of those guys that kind of had to make a decision. He's going to enter the NFL draft, or is he going to come back to school? He was a guy that Oklahoma prioritized to come back, upped his NIL. He's going to be paid handsomely playing in Norman this season. And from a production standpoint, I think that they feel like he's going to be the guy that when you need to get after the quarterback, when it's third down and you got to get off the field, he did it multiple times last year, and even in games that Oklahoma blew. I remember the Missouri game. He came up with a couple sacks at the end of the game, and it felt like, God, they're going to get out of here with a win. And you're up 7 with 2 minutes left, and then you get beat by 7 in regulation. So they have a lot of guys that have been around the program. Robert Spears-Jennings, another guy on the back end. You're still kind of waiting for Peyton Bowen. As I'm kind of talking through it, I think Michael Boganowski, he could be a guy that really kind of leaves his impression or footprint or, whatever on the OU Texas game. I could see him being a guy that maybe going into next season that really develops his name and starts becoming a little bit more of a household name when it's all said and done in the SEC.
That game in second weekend of October, it defines head coaches' legacies. Mac Brown and Bob Stoops are so intertwined because of what happened in the early 2000s. Yeah. Because of what happened in 2013 and 15, Charlie Strong, Tom Herman, their failures to win that game for the most part were a big reason why Texas moved on for them. At this point, neither coach has really been super successful. Texas wins have been big. Texas losses have been, storied, I guess, from the Oklahoma perspective. Sure. When you look at Brent Venables' losses, 3 points in 2 losses. So when you're thinking about a game that's in mid-October after you face Michigan, after you have a bye week, I mean, it's important. We all know it's important. But, how much might that game really define what happens with Brent Venables here in year 4?
Well, I think it'd probably be recommended not to get beat by 41 and basically the game's over, at halftime. I know that thing kind of got out of control before halftime and ended up being 28-7, but it will be interesting. And I think that, there's certain dates within a season that it's like, okay, they need to get to here. They need to get to here by this point. And certainly Oklahoma fans would hope that they're undefeated going into that game. You have the Temple game up in Philadelphia, which is, I think, more of like a fun trip than it is, more of a take this game seriously. Certainly the players will have to, but I think you could say that I don't think that if they lose the OU Texas game next year in the Cotton Bowl, that all of a sudden he's on the hot seat, but it adds ammunition if you're going to have that conversation at the end of the year. And certainly it would help if Oklahoma went down there and played well and got a little bit back to more accustomed to what Oklahoma fans have been used to. And, I think that in a certain sense, as bad as these last 3 years have been for Oklahoma football, they've been a product or a victim of their own success over the last 2 decades, and winning at such a high level, winning at such an elite level, not necessarily an excuse, has to get turned around. But, I do think that every game, every move that Brent makes here, once the season starts is going to be magnified because there is so much expectation and there is so much kind of demand to get this thing turned around.
Last thing I'm thinking about looking at the non-conference schedule, you mentioned to go, you don't lose to the Illinois State Redbirds.
Sure.
You got
they'll have a conversation if they lose that game. There will be a conversation, and it'll be an uncomfortable conversation.
I'll call you when I'm leaving the Horseshoe to ask how your day went.
Exactly. That's going to be fun. It's a fun trip. Ohio State's an awesome trip.
I'm excited. Tell Texas fans you went to 05 that, and they'll
I forgot about that. Sorry for bringing it up.
And they didn't even plant a flag in the middle of the field. Who knows how it's going to go this time? But you got Illinois State, Michigan at Temple, Kent State. Michigan's the obvious big one, probably a night game. Is that going to be that non-conference game or just that night game that maybe for recruiting, maybe for a number of different things they point at, or one of those SEC games? We don't know the times yet, but you'd have to assume something like maybe Ole Miss at home or maybe even Missouri in an old Big 8 matchup might be at home. Because you don't know that, though, is Michigan that game that everybody's going to point to as okay, we'll see how this season goes starting now?
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a big barometer test to just see where this thing is at. And obviously, you would hope that they put up a bunch of numbers, put up a bunch of yards and points against Illinois State. But then all of a sudden, even if it's a Michigan team that's graduated some guys on the defensive line, it's still going to be a really, really good test to see where this offense is at. On the flip side, you're going to probably be starting against a true freshman quarterback for Michigan. We'll see where this defense is at. And I think that will kind of set the tone for what is Oklahoma football in 2025. And, just kind of basing it off of like looking at the schedule and seeing what's out there in week 2, there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on that game. And I think it's going to be kind of fun to see, kind of where it's at. And there should be a lot of, not so much pressure, but I think there will be a lot of excitement. Anytime a team like a Michigan comes to town, it's not often that you get these marquee matchups, kind of like a Texas-Ohio State game that I think everybody should just have fun with. I think it'll be a difference. I'm excited about going up to the Big House in 2 years to kind of see what that thing looks like. I've never been up to Ann Arbor. I've heard it's a great college town. I think week 2 is a massive week for Oklahoma. It's a massive week for John Mateer to kind of build some confidence before you start an SEC schedule that, I think to a man is going to be one of the toughest conference schedules in the country. And it should be kind of interesting, kind of scary, kind of fun to see where this thing is at when we get to week 2.
Does Sharon Moore get to run out of the tunnel with his horns down just to, for old time's sake?
Yeah, he's lucky to be coaching, right, with the suspension, which I thought is like the most college football thing of all time, that he's going to serve it like the weeks after the Oklahoma game, which it would have sucked if he's was suspended for that. So I think everybody's pretty happy for the former Sooner.
Should be a lot of fun. A lot of great games on that schedule. And then, of course, October 11th. Can never get here soon enough. Nothing like
Best
that.
Weekend of the year.
The 9 a.m. beer it hits a little different when it's outside of the fair part. So, Eddie, man, I appreciate it as always. We'll be in touch before the season. I'll probably see you in Atlanta for media days, and it should be a good time.
It's crazy to think that, and I love the way that the SEC schedule, like summer schedule, works out, because you do have the coaches meeting next week or the spring meetings, and then you roll in, and all of a sudden it's going to be a big, SEC media day. So I'm excited about it. Should be a really interesting year.
Should be a lot of fun. Thank you as always. Thank you to all the guys at Sooner Scoop, and talk to you more during the season.
Sounds good.